Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, how are you today? I hope that you are always in the good condition and can follow this lesson with carefully. But firstly, we want to introduce ourselves. We are from Group 9 of Excellent Class or U19 of Economics Education. In this video, we will discuss a journal with the term of policy for the poor, and the title is National Proper Spending Programs and Their Effect on Income Inequality and Poverty Evidence from Vietnam. Okay, before we get into the journal discussion, I will introduce myself. My name is Anissa Rohmawati with student number 33.
Hello, my name is Raden Helmy Wira Saputra and my study number is 40 from 9 group of Excellent Class Economic Education.
Hi, my name is Indri Safitri. My student number is 4029 from 9th group of Excellent Class Economic Educations.
Let's start about first part. This is about research background. Research background. First, one of the biggest challenges facing developing country government is to reduce poverty and inequality simultaneously. And second, countries with low inequality tend to perform much better in reducing poverty. However, in reality, inequality and poverty are contradictory, especially in the ASEAN region. And then, inequality has increased in many developing countries as poverty has declined in recent decades. And then, Vietnam is an interesting case study to analyze the effectiveness of FTT in Asia because the country is considered an example of poverty alleviation. The poverty rate ratio has decreased substantially from 58% in the year 1993 to 14.5% in the year 2008. And the last, the Vietnam's economic experienced relative stability in the Gini coefficient of consumption expenditure during the 2000, which is different from other ASEAN economies such as China and Indonesia. Next part is problem in general about the journal. Problem in general. First, despite high economic growth, Vietnam poverty ratio remained high in the year 1990s, regardless of the poverty line used. This situation is accompanied by high inequality. Income inequality between the majority and minority ethnic groups also persists. And second, it's claimed that the National Development Program, later changed to NDP, tends to promote economic growth rather than provide social protection for the poor. Problem in general. And then, public spending aimed at the most vulnerable groups might not reach the intended recipients. It said that provinces facing poverty difficulties are correctly identified by the program. And then, households in greatest need do necessarily benefit relative to the fact that there is equal access to benefit for all within the province. The inability of the very poor to access and derive maximum benefit from program can lead to continued poverty and inequality. And then, the governance of NTP has come under criticism, namely that various divisions and levels of government have control over program practice, but gaps still exist in many areas. And the last, talk about the effectiveness of NTP and whether they are achieving the state goals of increasing poverty and inequality. The next part is about research question. Research question. First, what is the causal effect of Target National Pro-Poor Programs or NTP in reducing inequality and poverty in Vietnam? And second, How effective are Target National Poor programs or NTP in reducing inequality and poverty in Vietnam?
Okay, here I will explain the purpose of this article. The purpose of this research is, first, to find out the causal effects of targeted national proper programs (NTPs) in reducing inequality and poverty in Vietnam, and the second one is to analyze the effectiveness of national proper targeted programmed NTPs in alleviating both inequality and poverty in Vietnam.
Okay, before we go further into the discussion of this journal, we have to know what is the NTP. In here, I will explain you about the NTP. Let's go.
Okay, now I will explain what the National Proper Targeted Programs or NTP. This NTP is policies for the poor are taken by the government to reduce inequality and poverty in Vietnam. Okay, firstly, before we discuss about the NTP, we need to know that the economic growth in Vietnam is indeed very good, but the poverty ratio in Vietnam also remained high in the 1990s. The situation is accompanied by high inequality. Increasing inequality between urban and rural areas contributed to the largest share of the overall increase in inequality across the country between 1993 and 1998. Responding to the trend of poverty and inequality occurring in urban and rural areas, the government attempted to address this problem first by announcing Program 135. There are three stages. The first stage is on 1998 until 2005, and the second is 2006 until 2011, and the last is on 2012 until 2015. Program 135 consists of increasing transportation capacity, providing good subsidies for target households, and reallocating cultivated land for landless households. The government then prepared a series of supporting programs. Now we will talk about the NTP. NTP are now collectively known as a group of strategies, policy, and financial investment delivered by the Vietnam's government to improve multiple aspects of human well-being of the most vulnerable communities and households. They comprise, but the first, there is a Program 135, and the second is hunger eradication, poverty reduction, and job creation. And the third is safe water and rural sanitation. And the fourth is family planning. And the fifth is social cultural enhancement. And the sixth is education and training. These programs are in most cases shared at the provincial and district level. The central government allocates NTP to the province based on preliminary information on the socio-economic status of poor households.
Okay everyone, I will continue to discuss the data and methodology in this article. This research uses biennial panel data from 2002 to 2010 for approximately two-thirds of 63 Vietnamese provinces and municipalities, called provinces for simplicity. The data for NTPs are obtained from the online documents of the Ministry of Finance of Vietnam, or MOV, 2005A, 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2012. Data for expenditure per capita, poverty, and inequality are extracted from 5 waves of the Vietnam Household Living Standard Survey, or VHLSS. The data of provincial population and values of industrial and agricultural output products are from the online database of GSO 2015. The unit of analysis for this research unit is the province. Because of large variation in provincial population size, this research used the provincial NTP per capita as the variable of interest rather than total NTP. This research applied the Gini coefficient to the household survey data to gauge within-province inequalities. Household survey data are also used for calculation of the provincial poverty HCR based on the GSO-WB poverty lines. The model specification is contained in equations 1 and 2. If left unaddressed, there will be potential for bias, namely a result of potential two-way causal relationship between the dependent variables and NTP expenditure, especially in equation 2 when current NTPs were allocated based on the previous poverty incidences. An effective strategy to solve this problem is typically to use an appropriate instrument for NTPs. This research attempts to diagnose the endogeneity caused by the dynamic of dependent variables by using Spearman's rank correlation between present and one-wave lag inequality and poverty. Based on Table A1 on the side, all these indicators show significantly strong correlation coefficients. The existing lag endogeneity of dependent variables, in addition to endogeneity due to potential bidirectional causality between NTPs and inequality and poverty, must be addressed in a dynamic panel. The Gini coefficient of consumption expenditure is used as a proxy for income inequality. Table 1 shows that the mean value of the Gini coefficient for the whole sample is 31.8. However, it varies largely across provinces from 21.8 to 46.8. In addition, notwithstanding stability in inequality at the national level, the within-province disparity in income distribution presents a gradual increase over the 2000s. Starting at 30.5 in 2002, the index climbed to 32.3 in 2006, followed by a fluctuation in the latter phase and ended at 32.4 in 2010. With regard to the poverty variable, this research used the GSO-WB poverty lines with inflation adjustments from GSO 2011-693 to calculate provincial poverty incidences %. In 2002, there was only one poverty line applied to both urban and rural areas. However, they were calculated separately thereafter. We can see in Table 1 that poverty reduced significantly from 28.6% to 11.5% over the 2002 to 2010 period based on GSO 2011-693. The main explanatory variable of interest is the natural logarithm of NTP spending per capita and TPIT. In this study, the causal effects for NTPs are examined contemporaneously and like one period or wave, as it is expected that gaps exist in NTP application and effectiveness, resulting in delays to poverty incidence and inequality. As documented in Table 1, there is a sizable increase in NTP expenditure over time. In addition to the main variables of interest, this research also controlled for consumption expenditure per capita, educational attainment, and industrial agricultural output ratio. The natural log of real consumption expenditure per capita, EXPIT, is a proxy for a growth in living standards. In Vietnam, the contribution of education to inequality may be uncertain. OECD 2014 shows that on average, Vietnamese students aged 15 outperform those from selected developed countries with the same test despite the relative poverty of Vietnam. The influence of human capital and education is proxy here by average schooling years for those aged 15 and over. The last regressor is the industrial agricultural output value fractions, representing the level of provincial industrialization. The following is a summary of the variables used in the model. The Arellano-Bond Model. This present article applies the system GMM estimator developed in Arellano and Bond 1991, Arellano and Bond 1995, and Blundell and Bond 1998. System GMM uses two sources of exogenous variation. One, like levels of the dependent variable as instruments in difference equations, and two, like difference of the dependent variable as instrument in level equations. This research used system GMM for two reasons. First, the panel data used are dynamic and short, and this characteristic may compromise the quality of estimate when using traditional models. And the second one is Blundell and Bond 1998 showed that the difference GMM developed in Arellano and Bond 1991, which apply only the lag levels as instrumental variables for different equations, could omit essential information in the original data. This article uses the one-step GMM with the assumption of independent and identical distribution in the original residuals, because the two-step GMM estimator increases efficiency but includes many weak instruments which are created by a quadratic equation in the time dimension. Newey and Winmeyer, 2009, Acemoglu et al., 2015. Two essential internal checks are undertaken, namely autocorrelation in the idiosyncratic disturbance and over-identification of instruments.
Okay, next, here I will explain about the empirical results of this journal. Let's go.
Now, we will talk about the empirical results. Okay, here as we can see, there is a table 3 about the inequality model. Table 3 shows that the lack of the explanatory variable of interest, or NTP, is statistically significant. However, contrary to program intention, this coefficient is positive, implying that inequality is likely to increase in the province following increases in public funds devoted to poverty and inequality reduction. This is similar to the findings of previous researchers who say that poor households are likely to receive less than the non-poor in terms of absolute amount of money from the Vietnam social transfer policies. And the financial resources of Program 135 were misused with respect to the participatory determination and program supervision. The journal also observed that there is a positive relationship between per capita consumption expenditure and inequality, which means that Vietnam may experience a trend of increasing inequality as development progresses, where the beneficiary group and sectors, for example urban areas, can gain more from growth than others. However, increasing knowledge and skill, represented by the education variable, can hinder the increase in equality. So the suggestion is to focus on investing in education as a solution to inequality in Vietnam, because this allows poorer communities to expand their capacity in the labor of the market. Okay, next. Here as we can see, there is table 4 about the poverty model. In the table 4, we can conclude that there are no statistically significant relationship was found between NTP spending and poverty, implying that the program was not effective in achieving the stated objective. The results reflect the administrative and decision-making complexity of NTP with the involvement of various government ministries. Other than that, non-transparent organizational schools during program implementation, as well as acts of corruption, resulted in the benefit obtained by the more powerful non-poor groups, further eroding the effectiveness of the NTP. Similar to the inequality model, education is a contributor to poverty reduction. Getting more education helps the poor not only reduce the income gap with the rich, but also improve their standard of living. And next is the coefficient of the industrial agriculture output ratio is significant and positively related to poverty. A higher share of the industrial sector in the provincial economy does not guarantee a lower poverty ratio as more developed province that tends to be less targeted in terms of poverty reduction in both the number and size of program finance.
Now I will explain you about the conclusion of this journal. Let's go.
Now, from this journal, we can conclude that this article examines the causal effect of the National Targeted Pro-Poor Program or NTP on the incidence of poverty and inequality in Vietnam during the period 2002 until 2010. The study is the first to offer a comprehensive analysis of NTP spending on poverty and inequality simultaneously. The journal applied the general method of moment estimating system to the Vietnam's regional data panel. The empirical analysis conducted in this study suggests that NTP has an ineffective or undesirable consequences. Econometric estimates reveal that inequality tends to increase within the province after the NTP intervention. The results of the study reflect poor governance and policy implementation, where the most needy don't necessarily benefit from these expenditures. And the result of the study also state that there is a corruption. Corruption can affect the intended direction of the NTP. Okay, next. The result of this study indicate that the government should make NTP more transparent so that this program can be targeted to the poor and so that the financial support can go directly to poor households or poor communities. Improved schools were found to reduce inequality and poverty. Therefore, the main policy recommendation of this study is that improving education for the poor household should be a core pillar of NTP in order to correct the educational inequality that exists between urban and rural areas and between rich and poor households. Through reducing educational inequalities and access to accumulated human capital should have a beneficial impact on the twin targets of poverty and inequality alleviation.
Okay, now I will explain you about the policy recommendations and research advice in this journal. Let's go.
Policy recommendations and research advice. Besides, the government must be more transparent. The government should re-evaluate the governance and implementation of the NTP policy, as well as reduce acts of corruption, so that government spending in order to overcome inequality and poverty can run effectively to overcome inequality and poverty alleviation in Vietnam. And the second is the government's problem, which has difficulty identifying the most appropriate beneficiary for the poor, must be addressed immediately. The government can update the data on the poor every 2 years because the movement of the poor is very dynamic. And the last is future research should be able to focus on the effect of separate components, for example, like this only program 153 or HEPRGC, that could lead to a better interpretation of the combined and disaggregated impacts of NTP.
Positive criticism of this article is 1. Articles are written with scientific principles and scientific ethics. 2. Original article, not just a review. And 3. Have a complete journal structure.
In this part is negative critique about the journal. Negative critique about the journal. First, there is no statistical evidence in the journal to support the relationship between National Target Program or NTP and poverty alleviation. And second, the availability of data in this study is quite limited so that it can affect the result of the study. I think that's all from us. Thank you for your attention and thank you for watching and see you on the next video. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.